and a conversation with Edward Norton when we continue. Funding for Charlie Rose has been provided by the following. A lot of times we have actors on here to talk about films. Sometimes we want them to come and just talk. That is the case tonight with Edward Norton. I am pleased to have him back on this program. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
It's great to have you here, and just not to have a specific purpose, but just to talk. I want to talk about this idea. You said something that turned me on, which was this. Whatever you do in life, you have to connect with a sense of service, an idea you're doing something for somebody else. Where does that come from?
I think people in my family have had a big influence on me in that regard. Just a lot of my background, my parents and my grandfather were very, they were real, social activists, environmental activists, and I think they imbued us all with that instinct.
And how do you go about finding how you can make a difference?
Yeah, it's a tricky thing. I mean, I think with celebrity is a funny thing in that regard, because lots of people are happy to have even the barest kind of associative link, and I think you have to discipline yourself to, in some ways, find those things that maybe you're going to do more than just kind of attach your name to, but try to follow through on in a more meaningful way. Sometimes, even like having this kind of conversation, it's nice just to be able, because you're known in another sphere or respected in another sphere, to be able to engage in a conversation that maybe highlights the great work some other people are doing, because there's such a disproportionate amount of attention paid to entertainment, and it's nice to be a part of helping shift the focus sometimes over onto great work that other people are doing more quietly.
All right, let me talk about one which interests me. This is called Friends of the High Line. What is the High Line, and how did you get involved in this, and why is this important? Because we'll come back and say more about that.
Yeah, it's a fantastic effort. It just charged me as soon as I encountered it. For some background, the High Line itself is an old freight rail track that was built in 1934 to deal with the congestion on the industrial west side. It runs now from about the Javits Center on 34th Street of Manhattan, of course, down all the way through the Village and the meatpacking district, and right through the industrial west side. And it's an elevated freight rail track that was essentially abandoned. The use was ended in 1980, and in the 23 years since then, it's pretty much filled in. Nature has reclaimed the track bed and filled it in with
take a look at this. Here's a picture. We've also have other stuff we'll show you.
It's astonishing. It's this incredible study in what nature would do if left alone in the urban environment. But
every city needs a High Line.
Yeah. I mean, and it was something I had seen from a rooftop that I lived on for years and wondered what it was. And then I read this piece in the New Yorker by Adam Gopnik about the High Line and about this effort that had sprung up to try to prevent it from being torn down.
Now, how long ago was that?
This was just a year or two ago.
Exactly.
A year or two ago, and it turned out there was this incredible, to me, incredible story behind it. These two guys, Joshua David and Robert Hammond, had met at a community hearing about the issue. Realized that most people were just talking about tearing it down, property owners essentially, and they kind of said, well, hey, how come no one's discussing the creative reuse of this incredible structure that's got such not only a historic role in the transportation and the industry of New York, but represents potentially this incredible, unpredicted space that's been, preserved from the density of the development in the area, that could be an amazing public space. And within an incredibly short period of time, they got together, created this group, the Friends of the High Line, and in an amazingly short time have, I think, completely turned the conversation 180 to where the momentum is very much behind preserving the High Line and redeveloping it as a public space.
So you hear about this, and you read an article by Gopnik in the New Yorker magazine. Yeah. And you do what? You call him up.
Yeah, I just picked up the phone. I called him and said, hey,
this is a good idea.
This is an amazing idea. I mean, a historically great idea, in my opinion. It would be one of the largest creations of new public space in Manhattan or in all of New York City, I mean, along with the Hudson River Park. it's in Central Park. This thing is 1.5 miles long, and it goes right through the heart of, you know, a whole section of the city.
And so they said, come on down, we'd like to have
Well,
you.
I called and said, what can I do to assist you? I mean, obviously financial support, which I, you know, always try to give, but how can we help make this project more visible and get, you know, anything I said anything I can do to get to assist your effort.
All right, roll tape. This is a clip of some footage of the High Line. We'll talk over it. Take a look at this and talk about this, Edward.
Well, it's,
as we watch
you know,
it. Look at this. Wow.
I mean, I went up on it once under the escort of the rail company that owns it and with the Friends of the High Line, and it was just, I can't even overstate the impact it had on me, because it's like this vein of green running right through the industrial west side, and it gives you this astonishing new perspective on the city. There's this whole history that unfolds as you walk along it, and you can see that it actually goes through some of the buildings that it used to make deliveries into. You know, small groves of trees like this have grown up on it, and it's this incredibly unlikely natural reclamation project.
If it is preserved, what are people who were in the leadership of the preservation of the High Line interested in doing with it, if anything?
Well, certainly there's all kinds of things it could become, and the Friends of the High Line.
Is this great? Right in the middle of Lower Manhattan.
Right in the middle of Lower Manhattan, and this is all unmanned manipulated.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly. There's no great landscape gardener who set this up.
Not at all. But I think that, you know, personally, and speaking for myself, I think, of course, the idea of a park is always, you know, a wonderful one to me, natural space and green space. But it's such a big, it's such a long structure and an enormous amount of space. There's obviously opportunity for multiple uses of it, and they just sponsored a great sort of creative design competition for people to sort of
figure out what they want to do with it.
Ruminate
Is the battle over then? So we've saved the High Line?
No, not at all. It's these guys are quick to point out that it absolutely won't happen, despite the good momentum, without a massive amount of community and public support. There was actually
who makes the decisions?
Well, there was an important hearing today with the Transportation Board, and there will need to be issued a certificate for interim trail use, which has to do with the Rail Banking Act, where cities and states are allowed to claim a rail corridor and preserve it for public use while maintaining its usefulness as a rail corridor for security and.
And what's the argument of the people who want to tear it down?
Well, you know, I think it's important not to set up adversaries, but there was a property owners association that, of course, if the track were gone, some of their air rights would return and development rights. But I think everybody's hope is not to combat those interests, but to figure out a way for the city to address those people's needs, either through giving them zoning changes so that they can. Profit
so
from their
us
space
versus them.
Exactly. It's because it's something that will benefit the public, but also the property owners, because it would increase the flow of people and traffic and life in the area. It'd be good for business everywhere. And it's funny because you talk about the High Line. That's a local New York effort, a terrific effort that is exactly the kind of thing my grandfather would have just swooned over, this opportunity to creatively re-envision space in a city to improve public life. He said one time that a city should be a garden for growing people, and I always loved that. And you know, this is a local effort, but it dovetails very directly for me into some of the larger issues I'm interested in with urban renewal.